about what Jauan Jennings has meant to the Niners over the last couple of years. Somehow I think he's still underappreciated. He's still underrated. He's still flown under the radar because Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are such special players and they garner so much attention. And because of that, people kind of sleep on Jauan Jennings. Real Niner fans know, though, that Jauan Jennings is a dog. He thrives on money downs. He's always in the right place at the right time on third down, fourth down, making game-changing plays. He's a willing blocker. He's a clutch playmaker. He plays with swag, physicality, confidence, and a nonstop motor. And because of that, he's become a favorite of Niner fans and head coach Kyle Shanahan because of how he plays the game. But for the diehard Niner fan, and for the casual NFL fan out there, all they do is box score hunt, and they look at Jauan Jennings' numbers his first 3 years, and they say, why am I going to get too excited, and why am I going to hype up a player who in his first 3 years has had very limited production? A player who, by year, has had 38, 56, and 33 targets, 24, 35, and 19 receptions. And then the yards, he's never surpassed 500 yards yet in his NFL career. 282, 416, and 265. Was rarely targeted last year with the emergence of Brandon Ayuk and the all-pro play of George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey being the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. Jauan Jennings also has not been a touchdown machine. He had 5 in 2021 and then 1 each the last 2 years. But in February, against the Kansas City Chiefs in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium, a lot of people started to realize, or at least more people realized, this Jauan Jennings guy, former late-round pick out of Tennessee, who was on the receiving end of that Josh Dobbs Hail Mary against Georgia a few years ago in college, he's pretty damn good. He was the best Niners wide receiver in the Super Bowl as far as production. He was clutch. 5 targets, 4 catches, 42 yards. This touchdown right here. At that moment, I'm thinking, are the Niners going to pull it off? Are they going to complete that quest for 6? He was also a part of that trick play in which he caught the football on the far side of the field, threw it across the field. He was a former quarterback recruit at Tennessee to Christian McCaffrey, who shot out of a cannon on that awesome trick play for the score. But Jennings in that game also displayed his ability and his talent. And these under-the-radar nuggets, as far as chat stats, very interesting from Pro Football Focus. They ranked the top wide receivers by open target rate in 2023. And Jauan Jennings was tied for 8th among all wideouts in the NFL. You would not think that, right? Because he's not a blazer. He doesn't have great vertical speed, but he was open a lot. He had 42 total targets per PFF. 36 of them he was deemed open, and his open target rate was 85.7%. Jennings ranked 5th on the Niners in target rate at 16.8%. 5th on the team in target rate, catching 29 passes for 376 yards. He stepped up in the postseason, though, gaining 8 first downs on 10 catches while leading the team in passer rating when targeted at 133 flat. The 5th-year receiver enters training camp set to battle rookies Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing for slot snaps. Going back to what I said a little bit earlier, he just has this innate ability to be in the right place at the right time, to make the huge play, to move the chains on a money down. What he did in the playoffs on the receiving end of some of those Brock Purdy dimes over the middle was special. Now, of course, as part of this, Jennings could be open because of the playmakers around him in Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey, who's a part of the pass game, and because of the scheming up that Kyle Shanahan does. But what also makes Jennings special, he'll take a hit, he'll go up and get it, he'll make some really difficult contested catches, and that ability is always underrated because you can't measure that, right? You can't measure toughness. You can't measure getting hit and being able to reel the football in. So I think this is all part of the reason why the Niners really value Jennings, why they signed him to that contract extension so that he's under team control for the next 2 years, 2024 and 2025. And that's why they paid him. And Jauan Jennings has really earned it. And when you see him driving defenders into the bench on blocks, that gets everybody on the Niners sideline going. And as part of the Niners culture, players like Jauan Jennings move the needle. Players like Jauan Jennings are respected. And players like Jauan Jennings put fear into the opponent. So I'm looking forward to him having a bigger year, but PFF makes a good point. Is he going to be competing with Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing for snaps? That's kind of why the drafting of Ricky Pearsall was confusing to me, because you still have Ayuk, you still have Debo, you have Jauan Jennings. Where does Ricky Pearsall fit in? Is this a change in offensive philosophy where maybe the Niners go with 4 wide receivers? Then what happens with George Kittle? So all of this is very interesting, but all of it leads us into this last thought. The Niners, ladies and gentlemen, are loaded on the offensive side of the football. And that's why I think this year in 2024, if this team can stay healthy, there is no excuse why they shouldn't be able to duplicate and replicate their numbers from last year when they were the second most efficient offense in football. They were averaging nearly 30 points per game. Brock Purdy gets better. Kyle Shanahan matures. These weapons stay healthy. Look out. Schedule going to be tough, but defending the Niners going to be tough as well. Let's round out with this. Jauan Jennings is O for overrated, U for underrated, P for properly rated. What do you think? I'm going to go with U because I do think he's underrated. And I think if he went to another team, he could have gotten a lot of money. And I think that he'd be able to produce and put up more production. Going into the 2024 season, this Niners roster is stacked. Offensively, they have so many skill players who are elite and among some of the best players at their respective positions. And on the defensive side of the football, this Niners team is also littered with the bevy and a handful of all-pros and Pro Bowlers and players who could break out like Deommodore Lenoir and Jair Brown. And while this Niners team has the best overall roster in the NFL, in my opinion, there is still one glaring weakness, and it's a weakness that has been present for this team over the last couple of years. That is the offensive line, and it remains a question mark going into the 2024 season. And Pro Football Focus put together their offensive line rankings for all 32 teams in the National Football League. They had the Niners offensive line ranked 24th among 32 teams. Here's what PFF had to say about the trench play offensively for San Francisco. While the Niners' offensive line features a future Hall of Famer in Trent Williams and arguably the best offensive lineman of the past few years, those around him have so far failed to impress. The rest of the offensive line consists of either career journeymen, such as center Jake Brendel and right guard John Feliciano, or young offensive linemen who the 49ers hope can improve in 2024, such as Aaron Banks and Colton McKivitz. Now, I do disagree with what Pro Football Focus said there about everybody outside of Trent Williams not really being a valuable commodity. I know that the Pro Football Focus grades don't really check out for Aaron Banks, but I think he's been a very serviceable left guard throughout his career. And when Trent Williams and Aaron Banks have shared the field together, they have given up just 1 sack. I am in agreement with what Pro Football Focus said about 3/5 of the offensive line. Jake Brendel has been a career journeyman for a reason. I think he's a little bit small to be a center on a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, and against some of these really physical defensive linemen on the interior, he can get pushed around a little bit. His run blocking grades last year were really good. 2 years ago, he was a Pro Bowl alternate, but he struggles to protect in the pass game. And anytime a quarterback has the pocket muddied right in front of him, right in his vision line, that can cause problems for that quarterback. John Feliciano was excellent last year. Really good as a run blocker, good as a pass blocker. There's a reason he unseated Spencer Burford at the end of the year as this team's starting right guard. I like how he can play right guard. Last year, he filled in for Aaron Banks when Banks had a toe injury. He's also been a starting center in this league, and he's been successful. So I don't have many issues there, but he's a little bit older, and yeah, he has been a journeyman for a reason. And then Colton McKivitz gave up 47 pressures last year, and when he goes up against top-flight edge rushers, he really does struggle. So outside of the left side, I would say, Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, 3/5 of that offensive line, somewhat of a question mark. But here's how the Niners can solve that. You put Feliciano at center. I think he's an upgrade from Jake Brendel. Then you have Dominic Pooney, and Spencer Burford battle it out at right guard. I think in turn that makes the right guard position a little bit better. You're still going to have a weakness at right tackle because you didn't do anything to address right tackle in the draft or free agency. I don't think Chris Hubbard is a realistic option to unseat Colton McKivitz as the starter, but if you improve center and right guard, it makes your offensive line collectively a little bit better. But it's not a great look that the Niners have really failed to invest in that unit. I get it. They took Dominic Pooney in the 3rd round out of Kansas. Later, they drafted Jarrett Kingston. That's great. But still, going into the 2024 season, that is the position group that could hold the Niners back from reaching their fullest potential. You can tell me all you want about the Niners averaging nearly 30 points per game and being one of the best offenses. That is true. But imagine if they had dominant offensive line play, and imagine what they'd be able to do with better offensive line play with all of these skilled players if they invested and had a little bit more talent with that group. They would just dog walk teams and dominate week in, week out. Kyle Shanahan loves to play a physical style of football, yet his philosophy and John Lynch's philosophy in building up the team is they spend money elsewhere, and Chris Forster talked about this back a few weeks ago, where he'd rather invest his money in players who score touchdowns. I get it, but I think you got to find a quarterback, protect the quarterback, get after the quarterback. They pay money along the defensive line. They don't do as much of that on the offensive line. And in the biggest of games against some really good defenses, I think the offensive line has been problematic, and it could once again be problematic going into 2024. PFF knows what they're talking about. 24th among 32 teams. It's not great. So next, I want you to share an emoji that describes the Niners' offensive line. For me, it's kind of the yikes emoji, like, it's not great, man. You can put in the poop emoji, whatever you want, thumbs down, get creative with that. That's what this show is all about. It's about the faithful. Make sure you give me a follow as well on X and Instagram at Chase_Senior, approaching 13,000 followers on X, past 30,000 followers on IG. Say what's up, and we'll catch you next time here on the show. Peace!